found that informative.
If I can jump in, I was looking through some of the chat questions, and I saw the question from Miguel about the percentage of people who had to give get and what that meant for the organization. And I do just want to stress that the organizations that reported their the functions of the associate boards all had multiple functions. So none just had fundraising or none just had event planning. And we also found in our research that while fundraising is a very important component of the associate board, it shouldn't be the only way that organizations view their associate board. The associate board members really want to feel as though they're a part of the organization and not that they're just there to raise money. So hopefully that provides some clarity around that question.
Okay, great. So let's see, I'm trying to see. So that was the first question, Gabrielle, that you just answered. I think we see, I'm going through the chat function.
I see there's a question here from Danielle on associate boards and alumni associations. I don't know that anybody that I spoke with, that was a topic that came up. It certainly wasn't something that we addressed in our survey. So I don't know if Rachel and Luke, either of you talked to anybody about that?
I also do not have, nothing's coming to mind about alumni associations. Luke, did you talk to anyone?
I don't think anyone who I spoke to had an alumni association, although I will say anecdotally that, you know, other nonprofits in line with the concept of ensuring some mission and vision alignment, nonprofits who pulled their associate board members from, you know, existing pools of volunteers and people from their existing networks who they knew were mission and vision aligned, usually made really good contributions and helped onboard people who were less familiar with the organization, if that helps at all.
Danielle, I see that you have some questions here about balancing engagement and ensuring diversity of the associate board. I'm not quite sure what you mean by balance engagement. So if there's a way for you to expand on that, that would be great. And then we can try to address it. In assuring diversity of the associate board, I mean, I think that really falls to your recruitment and your application process.
Yeah, and you know, similar to research that's available on nonprofit governing boards, as well as corporate boards, more diverse boards make more successful boards. That's true across the board.
Yeah. Board.
I see a question about any advice on recruiting and fundraising events in the context of COVID when everything is remote. That's a tough question because when we conducted all of this research, we were not yet at this point. So I don't know if you guys have anything to offer.
Speak to that a little bit. One of the things that was very interesting, I think, as you mentioned earlier, is that a lot of the nonprofits had to work on transitioning their operations to be more remote driven. And so what we saw was a huge spike in interest for nonprofits that were interested in engaging young professionals for skills-based volunteer opportunities and remote volunteer opportunities. And there are a lot of ways that nonprofits have been innovating on their fundraising strategy and campaigns while leveraging their associate board members who tend to be quite savvy with utilizing social media to generate interest for their campaigns.
Yeah, that's a, oh, sorry, Gigi, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I see the second part of that question was asking about how to keep associate boards. It's saying associate boards work in a cohesive fashion, they're more likely to be impactful, which is very true. And how to do that now that everything is digital. And I think that kind of piggybacks off of what Roden was saying. You know, we're all getting more and more useful to conducting our life like this. So I think it's important to make sure that you're keeping your associate board engaged in an online format. So don't let the associate board meeting stop. Don't let the associate board engagement stop just because you can no longer meet in person. And hopefully that won't be forever.
I'm a member of an associate board, and we have our monthly meetings. They're just converted to Zoom meetings now instead of in person. So it's definitely important to keep the associate board engaged. One of the things I wanted to just also address really quickly, we use some terms in there, and if you have any questions on like what any word means, any phrase means, just feel free to just like post a question. One of the questions that I got was to define give get. And a nonprofit give or get is essentially a means for nonprofits to give the associate board members or even their governing board a fundraising target. So each individual board member is going to have a fundraising target, and that's the reason why it's called a give or get is either you could give that amount of money or give a portion of that money, or you could help get it in the form of for associate boards, you could do it in the form of in-kind contributions, or if you could get your friends and family to donate to the organization and that's attributed to you, that would count towards your give or get. So give or get is a fundraising term to describe how to contribute to the nonprofit.
I see too that Eli has a question on the sizes of an associate board. If we have a recommendation, and is there a detriment to having a very large associate board? Is there an optimal size? And I'm going to give you an answer that may not be satisfactory, but it very much depends on your organization. What you need to keep in mind is the capacity of your staff. You want to make sure that your organization can accommodate whatever size that your associate board is. We did find that some that had very large boards did find them kind of unwieldy. They tended to have really low engagement because their staff didn't have the time to keep the board engaged. So I would definitely keep the relativity of your organizational size in mind when you're designing the size of your associate board.
Yeah, and if I can just piggyback off that anecdotally, the people I spoke with in interviews who felt like they had a steady a steady associate board engagement that was consistent. They grew their board intentionally, so their board started small and grew to sort of build its own momentum. And usually it was the associate board who was taking charge of that kind of decision making and deciding a little bit on their own structure, rather than just setting a target of how many people you want and trying to fill that number however you can.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's really not so much about the number, but about what your board can get done in relative to what your organization needs. And to that point, there was a question here about whether or not it's appropriate to ask associate board members to serve as volunteers to develop the organization in whatever way is needed. And we did find that organizations did lean, so that's what we would consider pro bono skills-based volunteering, right? I'm assuming that you would need help in developing your organization, maybe in marketing or something to that extent. And that is fairly common for organizations to ask of their associate board.
And I think it also kind of connected the associate board members to the nonprofit that much more. We talked a little bit about in our presentation, just making sure to engage your associate board members in terms of volunteering and bringing them back to the mission of the nonprofit, because that's really why they wanted to get involved in the first place. So I think that's another important point, even in terms of ways to keep associate board members engaged right now. It's really to bring it back to the mission as well and kind of get them excited about that too. Trying to see if did we miss any questions here?
I see one asking, does CariClub connect young professionals and potential junior boards? If so, how do you add your nonprofit to the CariClub resources? So maybe CariClub team, you can follow up with Jennifer, or if you want to put in a plug to everybody now. And just, I think that adds nicely to the in remote times discussion, because you do have the benefit of a fantastic online platform that has a network component inherent in it, and that's CariClub.
If you haven't already, just go to CariClub.com and request an invite to the platform as a nonprofit. That's going to allow someone from our team to reach out to you and get your organization set up on the platform. So it's pretty straightforward. We make it as easy as possible. You just have to contact us and we'll take it from there.
And I see this question from Danielle saying, our alumni were mostly of color, and because board members recruited associate board members, that body was less diverse and it created some tensions. And did we see strict age cutoffs for the associate boards? The first part of that question is clearly really important, but I don't remember in my interviews anybody talking about difficulties with board diversity. They all mentioned the diversity of their board and their additions to the organization as a strength. I didn't hear anybody mention they felt like their board had a lack of diversity, which obviously doesn't mean that it wasn't there. But do you guys remember anybody talking specifically about that issue?
No, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I don't remember anyone saying it was less diverse due to that. I'm trying to think about the strict age cutoff. I think in our literature review, it was kind of around 30 something, almost 40. I don't know, Gabrielle?
Yeah, some did under 30, but most did under 40. But I'm assuming CariClub might have a better idea about that. Going back to the comment from Danielle, it does sound as though if you sourced your associate board members from multiple sources, that may help alleviate that situation a little bit. So that's something to consider.
Yeah. One of the, I'd say, advantages of working with CariClub to source candidates is that you're not relying on a very specific pool of people who is involved with the organization, because people will recruit people that they know in their immediate circle. And so if the organization starts off with a less diverse group and they're sort of recruiting within their immediate network, that's how you could potentially end up with a group of associate board members that are not not as diverse as you'd like. With CariClub, the companies give access to a host of their employees, and there isn't that network bottleneck. Everyone who has access to CariClub will have access to every nonprofit on the platform. So that's one of the things that I'm actually very excited about with the platform, is the fact that we are able to make it easy for everyone to discover those opportunities and get involved.
Let's see.
I see a question from Jack asking, curious if our survey found any pluses or minuses on having subcommittees within the board, and if there were specific types of subcommittees that were more successful. I can say anecdotally that people really enjoyed having those subcommittees. I think that fits into the concept of having a structured board, where you give somebody a title, or give them a specific charge, and generally they feel empowered with it. Is that your assessment as well?
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely a way to boost engagement. And as far as what subcommittees were more successful, it was usually those that were based around very specific tasks, such as events. So a committee that was focused on helping with a gala, or a committee that was focused on building out a new fundraising event, something along those lines. So something with a very clear deliverable, which, as humans, that kind of makes sense, right? We want to be able to deliver something and feel good about it. So yeah.
I see a question from fellow Wagner, Maisha Dickerson, asking if CariClub could provide a space for nonprofit leaders managing associate boards to share ideas of activities, projects they're working on, how they're keeping members engaged. As we mentioned, knowledge sharing is really important. I think that's a priority for CariClub as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We are happy to engage the nonprofit community and continue the knowledge sharing. This is a milestone accomplishment. And again, just the NYU Wagner team did an incredible job doing all that work to present, to get this presentation together. This is really just the beginning of something much greater. This is the first academic research on associate boards ever. So congratulations to the NYU Wagner team on breaking ground there. And we will learn a lot from this and we'll build on top of it. And we would love to engage the nonprofit community to make sure that the growth continues.
I see a question here, which is asking about what are some ways we can pitch mentoring voting rights and weighing in on high-level decision-making, which I'm interpreting as how can we pitch that to the associate board members, but if I'm wrong, please let me know. Rachel and Luke, did any ideas on how the relationship with associate board members and voting rights mentoring was formally structured that you could speak to?
So many people we talked to didn't actually have the governing board and the associate board interact as much. The majority of them were really doing intentional networking events at that time, the ones that we did speak to, which of course right now is a little bit hard to do. There's of course the option to do it virtually, but that would be a little bit hard. And in terms of voting rights, like our digital surveys showed, not many people were offering that. So that's sort of a nascent area as well. We don't really know. Unless, Luke, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah. So yeah, like Rachel was saying, you know, a lot of our surveys and interviews mentioned were people who don't currently, you know, have that formalized, but both the associate board members and the staff members and the governing board members all wanted that to happen. They just weren't quite sure how to get there, and that's, I think, a lot of probably what your question's pertaining to. You know, we just know that people want it to happen. As for how best to make it happen, I can say anecdotally, I remember from 2 of the interviews, there was one organization where the chair of their associate board attended every meeting, 2 where the chairs of the associate board attending every governing board member, every governing board meeting to report back to the associate board on governing board activity, and then to, you know, sort of provide the opinions and advice of the associate boards on particular issues. And in one of those instances, that associate board member had formalized voting rights on the governing board, and in one instance, they did not. But that was just one effective model that we saw. But as for how to, you know, what the best way to engage that was, again, people are still trying to figure that out.
And I think that's where having the opportunity to speak with other associate board managers will really, really help everybody, because you'll be able to learn from one another's mistakes and successes and really get processes established. I do see a question for CariClub here on whether or not CariClub works in Westchester County and in what exact cities you offer your services.
Yep. So we actually work in metro areas. And so Westchester County would fall within the New York City metro area. And if you have an organization out there, we would be able to work with you. We work in other cities across the United States. We are targeting a lot of the major cities, major hubs like your Chicago's, San Francisco, LA. But we are quite open because a lot of the companies that we work with have employees all across the United States. So if you are not in any of our existing hubs, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to work with you to get to help you recruit folks for your board.
Awesome. And then I see a question here on recommendations for handling associate board members that are far below meeting engagement targets. I would recommend two things. One, you look at it holistically and see if it's one particular associate board member or if it's your associate board members across the board. If it's your associate board members across the board, I would take a look at how you're structuring, whether it's your meetings or your give-gets or your interactions with your associate boards, because it may be an organizational issue rather than an associate board member issue. If it is one associate board member, or one or two, whatever, some of the people that we spoke with, how they were able to get their members back on track was by sharing their metrics with them. So on a quarterly basis, they would share a scorecard or a report with their associate board members. So they would know if they were meeting goals, and if not, they had an opportunity to speak with the staff that would liaise with the associate board. I don't know if Rachel and Luke have any other stories that they want to share along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was exactly what I was going to say, Gabrielle. I think to add to that, also, we've spoke about this quite a bit, but just making sure you're balancing the priority of volunteering hours and really talking about your mission with the fundraising and the sort of money part to it. Just even when you're recruiting members, making sure that they are passionate about the mission and the nonprofit mission statement, because that showed time and time again that that's what really kept those associate board members there, and that's what really kept them engaged a lot of the time. So, there's different ideas, to balance that, but, whether that means you have some sort of structure on you need to volunteer a certain amount of time, or, bringing it back to that would be helpful.
Sorry, I just realized I was still sharing my screen. Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I think those were.
I see. Oh, go ahead, Luke.
Sorry, no, go ahead, Rachel.
I was going to just say there's another question here about making the jump from the associate board to the larger board. Is there any recommendations for how to structure that transition process? From Hannah. So that is an interesting point. I'm trying to think if we came across that. I think the one, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but having the associate board members attend some of the governing board members meetings to really transition that process could be helpful. We didn't have specific questions that asked about the transition process, but I would assume, that having the associate board member kind of be part of those governing board member meetings sooner would maybe help that jump. Did you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say too that it's really a metric of a successful board, and that in some ways it will happen as your associate board members age and as they move through their career. Assuming your associate board is successful and your members stay engaged and they're aligned with your mission, then that is something that could happen rather naturally as they progress. Luke, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit, but people who have direct mentorship between an existing governing board member and a member of their associate board, people who really seem like they're expressing interest in future leadership, just having as many touch points as possible between the governing board and associate board. It might not guarantee that transition is going to happen, but it will certainly guarantee that if that transition does happen, that associate board member is going to make a very effective governing board member when they've had that much insight into the process beforehand.
I see Jack was asking a follow-up question on the metrics for the scorecards and reports. And yeah, those some shared them publicly and some just met with the members and spoke with the members directly. So I think it's really a matter of how you would want to structure it. I will say that from like a behavioral science perspective, when people know that their reports are going to be published, they tend to behave how you want them to behave. So it's something to keep in mind.
I think also to add to that, there was the one nonprofit that would sort of celebrate those who did end up reaching that goal. So maybe to condition it in a more positive light, you could do something where you're not kind of like beating down on them, but more celebrating those who actually did successfully meet those metrics that turned out successful for that nonprofit.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rachel, is keeping it more celebratory rather than punitive, for sure.
I'm not seeing any any questions that we didn't cover? Are you guys, am I missing?
I don't think so. I think we might.
If there's anything that we missed, sorry, but feel free to repost it in the chat.
I see one question here from Britta. Could you please discuss ideas about how very small organizations can get started? I'm assuming you mean getting started with creating an associate board. Does anyone have thoughts right away when they're
CariClub.
or Luke or Broden even?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, CariClub, you know, is really the only developed resource for this thus far. And just because you're a small organization, I don't think advice for starting would be any different than it would for any other organization, except again, what we mentioned about really taking into account your staff capacity. And, you know, it's probably going to require your associate board to take a little bit more autonomy and kind of design themselves. So, you know, you're just going to want to make sure that they're passionate and engaged. I think I want to, we mentioned at the beginning, but definitely want to give a shout out to our fourth invisible partner, Emma Rubin, who was instrumental in getting all this done. And Emma, if you have anything to add to any of what we've said, want to make sure that you get to chime in with your insights.
While Emma's collecting her thoughts, since she was unexpectedly put on the spot, I do want to add on to Luke's advice for the small organizations, and one being that it's never too early to rely on resources, which is how you should view an organization like CariClub. So I want to say again what Luke said, that there is no organization that's really too small. But because you would likely have to lean on your associate board member maybe more than a more established organization would, that places even more of an importance on your application and your vetting process, and making sure that the associate board members are aligned with your mission and that they're going to be able to fulfill the services that you really need as a small and developing organization.
And then this might be a question for CariClub. If you've set up your associate board with CariClub, what is the next step to obtain members for your board?
As long as they've been set up and they have a profile that is open, which allows members to apply, they should be able to receive candidates. But if they haven't seen any activity and they have any more questions, they are welcome to reach out to us, and we will help them figure out what they could possibly do to get more candidates.
Okay, great. And then they see Jody says, does CariClub offer an online discussion forum or other platform for associate boards of different organizations to brainstorm on ideas and knowledge share? So CariClub put me on the spot, but I know that in our last meeting with Renee, that was sort of in the works, and that's a big priority for CariClub.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, so this is essentially the kickoff for that. And we will be engaging more and more nonprofits so that we could do more of that knowledge share and get more engagement.
Perfect. And I think I went through all the questions. Gabriella, Luke, did you see any other pressing questions that we missed?
I think that might be it.
Yeah, and the copy of the presentation will be sent. But yeah, I think we covered all the questions. So thank you so much. I hope this information was helpful. And as we mentioned in the beginning, we will definitely be sharing, or CariClub will be sharing this recording and the presentation slides for you to all review and have to digest a little bit further. And we're really happy and we're really thankful for this year with CariClub and this research that we were able to conduct. So we all hope that you found this helpful.
Thank you so much, NYU Wagner team. We really appreciate all the work that you've put into this. It's very exciting stuff, and you are going to make such a huge impact in the nonprofit world, because this is going to be an important foundation that a lot of organizations could work from to build very effective associate boards. Now that we have at least a baseline to work with, we could really build from there and make sure that every nonprofit has the resources they need to get every associate board into to adopt all the best practices that makes them highly successful. There's definitely an interest on the nonprofits to get to that point, and there are countless young professionals who are eager to get involved. So really bringing all those things together in a way that makes the experience valuable for the nonprofit and the young professional is something that we're committed to at CariClub, and we are excited about what we've just started today.
Thank you so much for it, and CariClub team. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, we are looking like we just made that time, so we're good. Thank you, everyone. And if anyone didn't have any questions answered, feel free to email us at CariClub. Hello@CariClub is an easy way to reach us, or just go to cariclub.com and we are available. We're there to help.